Heroes of Might and Magic 3 has already been adapted into a board game, but Archon Studio has a new project in the works now. For the past few months, CEO Jarek Jarodowski has teased the studio's plan to create a new game that will open the tabletop floodgates for the Heroes franchise. The rules of the game have not even been written yet, but Archon is currently in the early stages of developing a Heroes of Might and Magic miniatures war game. What will the models look like? What game mechanics should we expect? And who are the game designers? I'm gonna tell you everything that we know so far. Plus, leaked information about a new Might and Magic video game. Archon is currently in the process of fulfilling shipment on the Heroes 3 board game, but their upcoming project will be a completely different endeavor. They've mentioned plans to release a trailer for the new game later this year. That trailer has not been released yet as of the time of this recording, but we do have hints scattered throughout the Archon live streams where a number of details have been released about the upcoming war game. First of all, the war game will not be an expansion or offshoot of the board game. The rules will be completely different, the scale of the miniatures will be completely different, it's a whole nother system. And it's not going to be a new Warhammer 40k either, rather drawing inspiration from Warhammer Fantasy Battle as a rank-and-file war game. Apparently, Archon Studios will be working with two of the former designers of Warhammer. The first is Jarvis Johnson, who spent over 38 years at Games Workshop. Board Game Geek shows that he has been a designer on 100 different games over the course of his career, including Blood Bowl and Age of Sigmar, but mostly the various iterations of Warhammer 40,000. The second designer is Andy Chambers, who has worked on over 30 different rule and source books for Games Workshop. He has also written a dozen novels and short stories set in the 40k universe, and was the lead story writer for StarCraft II Wings of Liberty. Man, this guy is really obsessed with Space Marines. What? Both designers have worked on Warhammer Fantasy Battle at some point, so the Heroes wargame will have some powerhouse design going into it as far as mechanics go. Archon really can't ask for a better team for this project. Now, I have to admit that I've never actually played a miniatures wargame, so I've had to research how Warhammer functions to get an idea of what the new Heroes game will look like. First of all, this will not be like Warhammer 40k, where the units move individually and independent of each other. Warhammer Fantasy Battle is a rank-and-file system where miniatures function as blocks of units that are placed on rectangular trays. When units move, they move in formation on the tray as a squad. Jarodowski feels that the rank-and-file system is the way that a Heroes wargame is meant to be played. And if you've played Heroes of Might and Magic, it is obvious how this style of wargame ties into the franchise. But there are some key differences. In the PC game, the units are grouped together in a stack, where the image of a single unit can represent thousands of units of that type. They move as one, they attack as one, and when units are killed, the number in the stack simply decreases. In Warhammer Fantasy Battle, things get quite a bit more granular. The models move together on a tray and enter close combat together, but not all models in a squad are guaranteed to be able to attack. Depending on how the enemy squads meet, only the models that are in contact with the enemy's models are able to attack. Except models in the second rank are able to act as support and attack as well. The models in the third rank are not able to attack. Well, unless the squad is 10 files wide, which makes a horde, then they can attack. And what I call a squad, the game calls a unit. But a unit to me should be a single model. But a single dragon model makes up an entire unit, and a horde should mean 50 to 99 units.
You gonna give me orders?
Now, Warhammer uses a point system to determine how many total units of the different types can start out on the field. This is done to assure a balanced game at the start. I would think that the Heroes wargame would use a similar system. The interesting thing is that Jarodowski says that he wants the players to have all options available as far as army composition. He's looking for players to have massive battles. If you just want 300 skeletons, that's fine. But if you just want 10 to 15 dragons, that works too. Again, this is how a Heroes 3 wargame is meant to be played according to him. And I can see why. In the PC game, your composition is only limited by your production capabilities and your resource income. With the miniatures wargame, it will essentially be the same thing, except your income is denominated in real money. Now, obviously, adapting a video game to any kind of tabletop format necessitates changes to the mechanics, like we've already seen with the board game. From an outside perspective, it makes a lot of sense for army units and rank-and-file squads to have to deal with flanking. But in Heroes of Might and Magic, there is no flanking mechanic, given that a stack of units has no internal formation. In fact, it actually functions more like Warhammer 40k in this regard. Facing may also become an issue to be dealt with. These are just some of the examples of how the game designers are likely to deviate from the original original gameplay. Now, one major question I really want to know, and I've tried to ask it in the AMA live streams, but it always seems to get overlooked, is whether each player will get a single spellcasting hero on the battlefield. Warhammer had spellcasters in it, so it's definitely not out of the question. And a Heroes of Might and Magic game without playable heroes? Well, obviously, that's not a Heroes game now, is it? I really do think it will be part of the game, but it would be nice to have a statement from Archon about it, as well as how it would be implemented. My guess is that they would use cards for the magic system, and they would probably look something like the spell cards in the board game. I also expect that they would produce some kind of modular terrain, because this is one of the things that Archon Studio specializes in for role-playing games. This does raise the question as to what the terrain would look like, because in the PC game, the only obstacles on tactical maps are rocks, ponds, and other natural obstacles, and the only structures that you have to deal with are castle walls and archer towers, which might actually be problematic for gameplay, because if one or both sides start the wargame with castle defenses, then the most advantageous tactic would be to keep units behind the castle wall the whole time. That's a recipe for stale combat. I'm sure Archon would want to produce terrain features and sell it. But it's going to be challenging to come up with wargame terrain that still feels like Heroes of Might and Magic. Now here's what we know about the miniatures themselves. The scale of the warrior miniatures will be 32mm, while dragons and other large creatures will be much bigger. The units will be on square bases, obviously in order to have them stand in formation on the squad trays. Personally, I prefer the look of miniatures on round bases. I think it just has a cleaner look to it, but in order to get the rank and file functionality, then of course it's going to require square or rectangular bases. All the minis will be produced in-house at Archon Studios headquarters in Poland, and they will be using their own production equipment. The minis will be made from high-impact polystyrene, aka HIPS. HIPS is able to give better detail than PVC, meaning that the miniatures will look even better than the ones in the board game. And when you buy the minis, they will come on sprues and you will have to assemble them yourselves, just like Warhammer. This will be a new experience for me, because the only miniatures I've ever painted are for role-playing games, and I've never had to clip them off of sprues or glue them together. Archon also wants to add modularity to the larger units, making it possible to have figures like dragons that have multiple different poses in order to make each completed miniature look unique. I'm not sure how this would work with smaller soldiers, but again, I've never assembled miniatures before. So if you know all about assembling miniatures, tell me how it works in the comments. As far as the aesthetic, Aradowski seems to want to take some liberty and deviate from the model designs in Heroes 3. He actually prefers the model designs in Heroes 6 and 7 because according to him, the Heroes 3 models will not translate well to physical miniatures, while the designs of later editions would be perfect for miniatures, at least in his opinion. The main reason he wants to go down this avenue is because he wants the Heroes of Might and Magic miniatures to rival Games Workshop to the extent that a non-wargamer wouldn't be able to tell which developer created the minis. I'm not sure how I feel about leaving the Heroes 3 aesthetic though. While I am in favor of the minis being the highest quality possible, and some units like Pikemen would look better in the Heroes 6 and 7 aesthetic, I'm really not in favor of drastic style changes that would make the units unrecognizable, such as the newer Lich and Cyclops. What little feedback has come from the community at this point also seems to be in favor of keeping the Heroes 3 designs. Either way, this could end up being a moot point, because Ubisoft has only granted a license for the Heroes 3 IP, and Archon would need special permission to use the unit models of the later games. But there's a new twist that Aradowski hinted at in Livestream 39. Archon Studio has been speaking with Ubisoft about the model design, and Ubisoft apparently gave them access to refreshed materials and refreshed units, something new that hasn't been seen before. And it's a good bet that this is related to the leaked information about Ubisoft creating a new Might and Magic video game, because on November 16th of last year, Ubisoft registered 2 domain names for mightandmagicfates.com. On top of that, there have been at least 2 job listings for Ubisoft Shanghai, for both a senior brand manager and a world director for Might and Magic. These job listings are at least 2 years old. It looks as though Ubisoft is currently creating a Might and Magic AAA open world game, and you have to wonder if Ubisoft is chasing after the success of Elden Ring. I'm definitely going to keep a lookout for more info on this one, and we'll bring an update when the news drops. So if you'd like to know when it happens, well, you know what to do. Archon will also be announcing more information about the Heroes Wargame at the Salute 51 convention in London this coming April, where they will be revealing miniatures and concepts from Ubisoft that are purportedly better than GW. Big claims right there. We'll have to see if it lives up to the hype. As far as what to expect when the game releases, Arodowski said that Archon will be releasing a starter box with 2 factions, plus an additional faction as a separate purchase. He says that the minis will be priced right, and I'm hoping that means they are less expensive than what's available from Games Workshop. The game is expected to be released in the first or second quarter of 2025, but we'll have to wait and see if that release date holds, because Archon Studio has had a major delay with their last Heroes of Might and Magic tabletop game, and they are losing a lot of money because of it. So if you want to find out what the problems have been, then this is the next video you want to watch.